When a waitress served Barron Trump at a quiet cafe, she expected nothing more than an ordinary shift. But what he left behind, a simple note and a tip, brought her to tears and ignited a conversation across the nation. The cafe was steeped in the comforting aroma of espresso, mingling with the faint sweetness of freshly baked pastries. The usual afternoon lull had lingered longer than expected, and the chatter among patrons had softened to a faint hum. For Dinah, the shift felt never-ending. Every tick of the clock seemed slower, every clink of cutlery a reminder of how long she had been on her feet. She wiped the last table near the window, checked her phone, and sighed. Just one more hour to go. Rent was due in 2 days, and her phone bill remained unpaid. Tips that day had been disappointing, mostly spare change tossed indifferently by patrons, too engrossed in their screens to make eye contact. Dinah tightened her ponytail, grabbed her order pad, and braced herself to get through the final stretch. The bell above the door chimed, jolting her out of her thoughts. She turned to see a young man enter, a tall, lean figure dressed simply in a plain shirt and slacks that exuded effortless composure. Two men followed close behind, their sharp gazes sweeping across the cafe, blending almost too seamlessly into the background. This wasn't the kind of place that attracted high-profile guests. Dinah couldn't imagine celebrities frequenting the quiet little cafe, let alone someone important enough to require security. For a moment she froze, her pen hovering over the pad. But years of training kicked in, and she approached the table where the young man had chosen to sit. "Good afternoon," she greeted, summoning her best smile. "Can I get you something to start?" The young man looked up, and for a fleeting moment, Dinah felt her breath catch. His face was strikingly familiar, a calmness etched into his features. Then it clicked. Barron Trump, the son of the former president. She had seen his face countless times in the news. Her heart quickened, but she reminded herself to stay composed. He was a customer, like any other. "I'll just have a cappuccino," he said softly, his voice polite yet reserved. "And maybe one of those croissants." "Absolutely." "Anything else?" she asked, her tone steady. He shook his head, offering a faint smile. "That'll be perfect, thank you." His words were simple, yet they carried an undertone Dinah couldn't quite pinpoint. Kindness, perhaps, or sincerity. She scribbled the order, turned toward the counter, and tried to steady the flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was nerves or exhaustion, but something about this moment stayed with her. As Dana prepared the coffee, she found herself glancing back toward the corner table. Little did she know, this small interaction was about to turn her day, and perhaps her week, on its head. The steam from the cappuccino machine hissed as Dana frothed the milk. She kept her movements deliberate and steady, trying to focus on the task at hand to shake off the odd nervous energy twisting in her stomach. Why am I acting like this, she wondered. Barron Trump, of all people. Her eyes darted back to the table. He sat quietly, his posture straight but not rigid. Unlike most patrons, he wasn't scrolling through a phone or typing on a laptop. Instead, he stared out the window at the street beyond, seemingly lost in thought. Occasionally, he sipped water from the glass she had placed on his table earlier. By the time the cappuccino and croissant were ready, Dana had managed to compose herself. She balanced the tray carefully and approached his table. "Here you go," she said softly, placing the cup and pastry in front of him. He looked up and offered a faint smile. "Thank you." "You're welcome. Let me know if you need anything else," she replied, her tone polite but neutral. As Dana turned to head back to the counter, something made her pause. Maybe it was the feeling of his gaze lingering on her, curious but not intrusive. Or perhaps it was just her own tiredness making her hyper-aware. Either way, her heart fluttered again. Minutes passed, and Dana busied herself cleaning empty tables and refilling sugar containers. The cafe had fallen silent once more, the only sound being the faint hum of background music. Yet she felt a strange weight in the air, like something unseen urging her to pay attention. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed Barron pull a pen from his pocket. Leaning over the receipt, he scribbled something quickly, as though he didn't want anyone to see. Then he folded the paper neatly and tucked it beneath the empty coffee cup. He stood, gathering his phone and coat. Dana watched him for a moment before forcing herself to refocus. "Thank you for coming," she called softly as he passed by. He turned slightly and smiled again. "Have a good day." Those words lingered longer than they should have, and Dana found herself frozen in the middle of the cafe, her eyes following him as he exited with his security detail close behind. The bell above the door chimed one last time, and then the cafe grew quiet once more. Dana let out a slow breath, picked up her tray, and walked over to clear the table. The cappuccino cup sat empty, with a small residue of foam clinging to its rim. Beside it, the croissant plate held nothing but a scattering of crumbs. And then there it was, the receipt. Dana picked it up carefully, her fingers trembling slightly, as though the folded paper weighed more than it should. Her first thought was of the tip. Perhaps it would be generous. Wealthy customers often left large tips to compensate for their lack of interaction. But as she unfolded the receipt, her breath caught in her chest. At the bottom of the receipt, beneath the total, was a number, a tip so large it made her stomach drop. 4 crisp digits. But it wasn't just the money that stole her breath. It was the handwritten note above it. "Your kindness and hard work don't go unnoticed. My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." Dana's hands began to tremble as she read the words again, slower this time, letting every sentence sink in. Her eyes darted toward the door where Barron had disappeared moments ago, and her vision blurred as hot tears filled her eyes. Her knees felt weak, and she stumbled into the empty chair across from where he had sat, clutching the note tightly in her hand. She stared at it, her mind racing. The tip wasn't about the money. It was the words, simple yet profoundly empathetic. Someone she never expected to notice her had acknowledged her struggles and left her with hope. For the first time in weeks, months even, Dana felt truly seen. Tears streamed down her face as the weight of the note's meaning settled in her chest. She thought about those words, their unexpected power. But this moment wasn't over, not yet. This story, her story, was about to ripple far beyond the walls of the little cafe. The sound of the cafe door opening jolted Dana out of her trance. She quickly wiped her tears with the back of her hand and tucked the note into her apron pocket as her manager approached. "You okay?" her manager asked, narrowing her eyes with concern. "What happened?" Dana hesitated for a second, searching for the right words. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice cracked slightly. "Just a really generous tip." Her manager raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "Generous enough to make you cry?" Dana nodded, managing a shaky laugh. She reached for the folded receipt and handed it over. The moment her manager saw the number, she let out a low whistle. "No way. Who left this?" "Corner table," Dana replied softly. "That was Barron Trump." Her manager blinked in surprise. "The Barron Trump? Are you serious?" "Yeah," Dana said, pulling the note from her pocket. "But it's not just the money." She handed the note over carefully, as though it might crumble in her hands. Her manager read it, and for the first time in months, Dana saw a genuine softness in her boss's eyes. "Wow," her manager whispered, handing the note back. That's something else." "It really is," Dana agreed, folding the note again as if it were a priceless treasure. "I don't even know why he wrote it. I didn't do anything special." Her manager looked at her for a long moment. "Sometimes people just know, Dana. They can see what you're going through, even if you think you're hiding it. You're here every day, working your tail off, always kind to customers, even the ones who don't deserve it. Maybe he saw that." Dana swallowed hard. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For months, she had been treading water, working double shifts to pay rent, skipping meals to cover her mom's prescriptions. She had been kind because it was the one part of herself she refused to let the world take away. Somehow, Barron had seen that. As the minutes passed, a strange buzz filled the cafe. A couple of coworkers whispered by the pastry display, occasionally pointing toward the table where Barron had sat. News traveled fast, and it wasn't long before one of the baristas approached her. You served him, didn't you? The girl asked, her voice a mix of excitement and disbelief. What did he say? Was he nice? Dana smiled faintly. Yeah, he was really nice. Man, I'd freak out. The barista laughed. That's so crazy. Dana didn't say anything more. She didn't want to explain the note or the tip. Sharing it felt like taking something sacred and putting it on display. For now, it was hers alone. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Somehow, every interaction felt lighter, every table she cleared a little easier. By the time she finally pulled off her apron at the end of the day, the folded note was still safe in her pocket. As Dana made her way to the subway station, she found herself holding the receipt again, staring at the words, "My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." She whispered the sentence under her breath, as if saying it aloud might make it real. He didn't have to write that, she thought. He didn't have to care, but he did. As the train rumbled through the tunnels, Dana closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe, truly believe, for the first time in a long while that maybe, just maybe, things would get better. But what Dana didn't know was that this quiet moment would soon echo far beyond her imagination. The note wouldn't stay a secret for long. The next morning, as the sun barely peeked through her apartment window, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Groaning, Dana rolled over and squinted at the screen. Her lock screen was flooded with dozens of notifications. "Why is everyone texting me?" she mumbled, still half asleep. Messages blurred together as she tried to focus. "Girl, is this you? You're famous. Is this real?" Her thumb hovered over one message with a link attached. She hesitated, her heart racing, before finally tapping it. Dana froze, her tray balanced in her hands, as a reporter's voice muffled through the glass. Customers turned to look, murmuring among themselves. Her manager hurried over, her expression a mix of concern and excitement. "They're here for you," she whispered. Dana's stomach churned. "I don't want to talk to them." "You don't have to," her manager said gently, "but they're not leaving anytime soon." Dana tried to steady her breathing. She wasn't prepared for this kind of attention. She was just trying to get through another shift, pay her bills, and move on. But now the cafe felt like a stage, and she was the unwitting star of a story she hadn't asked to be part of. "Take a break," her manager urged. "I'll handle things out here for a bit." Reluctantly, Dana slipped into the back room, her hands trembling as she leaned against the counter. She pulled out the note again, reading the familiar words, "My family has been where you are. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming." She clung to the note like a lifeline, letting its message anchor her. After a few minutes, she took a deep breath and stepped back out onto the floor. The news crew remained outside, but Dana managed to avoid them by sticking to her routine. By mid-afternoon, the cafe settled back into its usual rhythm. Still, the stares and whispers didn't stop. When her shift finally ended, Dana left through the back exit to avoid the cameras. The chilly air hit her face as she walked to the subway station, clutching her bag tightly. She wanted to disappear into the anonymity of the city, but she knew the story would follow her. As she sat on the train, her phone buzzed again. Another notification, then another. She hesitated, then opened her social media app. Amid the chaos of messages and tags, one comment caught her eye. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest impact. You deserve this, Dana." Dana stared at the words, her chest tightening. Maybe it was true. Maybe, for once, the universe was reminding her that she mattered. For the first time that day, Dana smiled. And as the train carried her home, she decided to face whatever came next, with the same kindness that had brought her to this moment. Dana sat down beside her mom, resting her head against the back of the recliner. She stared at the television, watching her own story being told to the world in polished sound bites and dramatic headlines. It felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. "I just wanted to get through my shift," Dana murmured. "Pay rent, buy groceries, that's it." Her mom reached over, placing a frail but steady hand on Dana's. "Sometimes life has a way of reminding us that we're not invisible, no matter how much we think we are. Dana blinked back tears, swallowing the lump in her throat. But now everyone knows. I don't want this attention. It's not about me. Her mom smiled softly. Maybe it's not about you, but it's also not about staying hidden. You were seen, Dana, and sometimes being seen can inspire others to look a little closer at the people around them. Dana sat in silence, letting her mom's words sink in. She hadn't asked for this, but maybe there was something bigger at play. Maybe sharing her story, as uncomfortable as it made her, could spark something good in others. That night, Dana lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the note still clutched in her hand. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Another message from her manager. They're waiting for your answer. The morning show needs to know by tomorrow. Dana turned off her phone and closed her eyes, Barron's words looping in her mind. Stay strong. Brighter days are coming. By morning, she knew what she had to do. When the cameras rolled the next day, Dana sat nervously in the studio chair, a microphone clipped to her shirt. The bright lights were blinding, and her palms were damp with sweat. The host smiled warmly at her. Dana, your story has touched so many people. Can you tell us how it feels to be at the center of this moment? Dana took a deep breath, her fingers brushing the note she'd tucked into her pocket for courage. It feels overwhelming, she admitted, her voice shaky but steady. I didn't expect any of this, but what I want people to know is that this isn't about me, or even about the tip. It's about kindness, about seeing people for who they are and reminding them that they matter. The host nodded, leaning forward. And what would you say to Barron Trump, the young man who wrote the note? Dana smiled faintly, her nerves settling as she spoke from the heart. I'd say thank you, not just for the generosity, but for reminding me and everyone that small acts of kindness can change a person's day or even their life. It's a lesson I'll never forget. As the interview ended, Dana felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The world might know her story now, but she'd told it in her own way, on her own terms, and for the first time, she felt like brighter days really were ahead. Dana's story became more than just a fleeting headline. It became a movement. The ripple effects of that one note reached further than she could have imagined. People across the country began sharing their own stories of small but meaningful acts of kindness. Cafes started putting up boards where patrons could leave encouraging notes for strangers. Schools talked about empathy and kindness during morning assemblies. Dana's quiet strength and humility resonated with so many because she was like them, ordinary, struggling, doing her best. Her willingness to speak about what truly mattered, beyond the noise of fame or money, reminded people of something they had almost forgotten: that humanity shines brightest in its simplest, purest forms. Years later, as Dana looked back on that moment, she realized it had shaped her in ways she couldn't have foreseen. She had taken that small act of kindness and turned it into a beacon for others. Brighter days had come, not just for her, but for countless others, and every time she opened her wallet and saw the note, she was reminded of one undeniable truth: kindness changes everything.